Raised among the corridors of Jerusalem and the shadows of political strife, Sibylla, daughter of Amalric I and Agnes of Courtenay, grew up knowing the throne of Jerusalem wasn't a privilege, but a battlefield. Amid fragile alliances, sudden deaths, and relentless pressures, the young princess would become Queen of Jerusalem in the midst of a storm. Daughter of Amalric I and the controversial Agnes of Courtenay, Sibylla grew up amid the political and religious tensions of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Brought up at the royal court, she was educated both as a princess and as a potential heir to a throne encircled by external enemies and internal factions. From early on, she learned to smile at people she despised and to weigh every word when dealing with the proud Crusader nobility. Her brother's health, the young Baldwin IV, also known as the Leper King of Jerusalem, worsened with each passing year. The advance of leprosy made it clear that the kingdom had to plan for a succession, and every eye turned to Sibylla. She was the only hope for dynastic continuity at a time when Jerusalem faced the growing threat of Saladin and the collapse of its own internal unity. The princess's marriage therefore became a matter of state. Each faction tried to impose a suitor who would secure its influence. Sibylla's mother, Agnes, moved skillfully behind the scenes to maintain her lineage's power. In 1176, the young princess married William of Montferrat, a prestigious and respected Western noble. The union was celebrated with pomp and for a brief moment represented the hope of stability. Fate, however, proved cruel. William died a few months later, a victim of malaria, leaving Sibylla a widow and pregnant. The birth of her son, Baldwin, gave the Jerusalem court the male heir it so longed for, as King Baldwin IV couldn't father children because of his advanced leprosy. Sibylla was now both widow and mother of the future king, placing her at the center of a complex web of alliances, mistrust, and ambition. Her position was simultaneously fragile and powerful, targeted for manipulation, yet a key piece in the succession game. While the Leper King slowly lost his strength, new figures appeared. Amalric of Lusignan, already established at court, brought his brother, Guy of Lusignan, to the east. Sibylla's mother quickly saw in him an ideal ally, loyal, easily influenced, and distant from local factions. In 1180, Sibylla married Guy. The marriage was unpopular among the kingdom's barons. Nobles like Raymond III of Tripoli and the Ibelin brothers feared that Guy, inexperienced and impulsive, would endanger the already shaky balance of Crusader politics. Tensions rose when Baldwin IV's illness prevented him from leading as before, forcing him to name Guy as regent. Guy's inability to act firmly in the face of Muslim threats left him isolated. Sibylla herself, caught between loyalty to her husband and duty to the kingdom, found herself wrapped in accusations, whispers, and plots to depose her. But everything worsened when Baldwin IV succumbed to his illness. The dead king was succeeded by his nephew, the young Baldwin V, Sibylla's son. Yet the boy's reign was short, and after his premature death, the kingdom plunged into a new crisis. Amid the disputes, Sibylla surprised the nobles. She agreed to have her marriage to Guy annulled, on the condition that she could personally choose the next king. The proposal seemed sensible, but after her coronation, she stunned the court by choosing Guy once more, crowning him herself. Guy of Lusignan's coronation, by Sibylla's direct choice, split the kingdom of Jerusalem into two irreconcilable halves. While some factions accepted the new king's authority as a fait accompli, others, such as Raymond III of Tripoli, the House of Ibelin, and much of the military elite, saw in Guy a reckless adventurer, unfit to face Saladin's growing threat. The kingdom, already weakened by internal quarrels, now moved toward collapse. Saladin, watching closely, spotted his opportunity. Uniting the Muslim forces of Syria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia, he launched an all-out campaign against the Crusader states. The crisis erupted in July 1187. Pressured by his most radical allies like Reynald of Chatillon and the Templars, Guy decided to leave Sepphoris with a large army to relieve the fortress of Tiberias, besieged by the Muslims. the plan was ill-conceived. In the scorching summer of Galilee, the Crusader forces marched across arid ground with no access to water, while Saladin's army encircled them with speed and cunning. On July 4th, on the plateau of Hattin near the Sea of Galilee, the armies met. Thirsty, disorganized, and enveloped in smoke set by the Muslims, the Crusaders collapsed. The Battle of the Horns of Hattin became the greatest military disaster in the history of the Latin kingdom. Nearly every baron was killed or captured. The true cross, the sacred relic borne by the army, was lost. Reynold of Chatillon was executed by Saladin himself. Guy of Lusignan was spared but taken prisoner. Sibylla, who had remained in Jerusalem, received news of the defeat with the weight of someone who saw the end of everything she'd sworn to protect. Widowed of power and queen of a kingdom in ruins, she tried to organize the city's defense with the few resources that remained. In October, Saladin laid siege to Jerusalem. With no army and no reinforcements, the city couldn't hold out. On October 2nd, 1187, Jerusalem surrendered after negotiations led by Balian of Ibelin. With dignity, Sibylla left the holy city without wealth or royal guard, yet still with a queen's courage. She headed to Tyre, where many of the remaining Christians were gathering. Even in tragedy, she refused to abandon Guy, imprisoned in Damascus. The loyalty that had sealed her choice of husband persisted, even under the weight of misfortune. After a year in captivity, Guy was freed by Saladin. The decision was strategic. Saladin hoped that Guy's presence as king would further weaken the Crusaders, preventing more capable leaders from rising. Sibylla was reunited with her husband soon afterward, in 1188. With almost everything lost, the couple set out to reconquer. Guy, trying to reassert his authority, went to Tyre, but was rebuffed by Conrad of Montferrat, who already ruled there with the support of the barons and populace. Politically defeated, Guy gathered what was left of his honor and marched to besiege the city of Acre, still in Muslim hands. Sibylla went with him. Thus began what would become the longest and bloodiest siege of the Crusades. In 1189, the Western forces of the Third Crusade began to arrive, but the siege was slow, grueling, and plagued by disease. It was a damp city, infested with mosquitoes and prone to outbreaks of fever and plague. Amid the suffering of soldiers and pilgrims, Sibylla stood out as a steady presence. The queen, though discredited by many, showed compassion among the wounded and a quiet resilience in the face of tragedy. In the summer of 1190, fever caught up with her. First came chills, then delirium. Within a few days, the queen's body, already weakened by the long journey, succumbed to the illness. Her two daughters also fell sick and died shortly afterward. With Sibylla's death, Guy of Lusignan lost not only his wife, but the foundation of his legitimacy. Without her, his claim to the throne of Jerusalem became untenable. The barons, led by Conrad of Montferrat, joined forces to exclude him definitively from the succession. Sibylla died far from Jerusalem, far from glory, far from peace. Her life was marked by loyalty, tragedy, and quiet courage. Though treated unfairly by many chroniclers, she remains one of the tragic figures of Crusader history. A woman who tried, until the very end, to uphold a kingdom that had been crumbling long before its fall.